more stars on that sofa than a tax office in Panama.
Graham kicks off your weekend with a star-studded new series of The Graham Norton Show. Friday at 10:35 on BBC One.
Shirley's better off without Buster, at least that's what she's telling herself. EastEnders at 8 after tonight's Inside Out. First on BBC One, it's time for...
Hello and welcome to The One Show with Matt Baker.
And joining me tonight, whilst Alex is away, is Angela Scanlon. It's nice to have you back, Angela. Lovely to have you back.
Thank you.
Now then, for tonight's guest, we have got a true time traveller. Now, he's whizzed forward through the centuries from the Middle Ages to the First World War, playing one of comedy's funniest and dimmest characters.
And for 20 years, he's zipped back in time, digging up archaeological secrets all over the UK.
But the big question is, why does time seem to have little effect on this man? Let's have a look at him at the age of 13 as the Artful Dodger. Nice. There you go. Wonderful picture. I'm sure you've worked out who it is.
This is him, age 43, hatching a very cunning plan.
And here he is right now on our green sofa. Please welcome Sir Tony Robinson.
For being here.
Oh, nice to see you.
Did that picture of you as a little 13-year-old boy peering through the bars, did you ever think at that time that you'd be getting knighted many years later?
No, it's just been a crazy, crazy, exciting journey. A weird, weird journey.
Was it daunting? I think I would fall over if I was given any sort of honour of that.
Oh, the old knighthood.
Yeah.
Yes. I just vaguely heard that something might be arriving, but I didn't know what it was. Would it be an O? Would it be an M? And then when we found out what it was, we were in Australia at the time, and my wife was bouncing around the hotel room going, "It's a K! It's a K!"
It's a K! Knock out!
That's the top one, absolutely. But Tony, you are looking as fresh-faced as ever. I know the time seems to have no effect.
Listening to what you were saying earlier, I think it's just because I just enjoy what I do, and it's always a surprise. And I don't plan on anything. I don't have huge ambitions. I just think, oh, I just went down the road and did Simon Mayo. Oh, I'm doing the One Show now. Oh, what am I doing tomorrow?
Wonderful.
And it is all genuinely an adventure, and I love it. Just like you two do.
Yeah. Well,
that's what we were saying just before it started.
Absolutely. Well, it's lovely to have your company tonight. We are very much looking forward to talking about your new book, No Cunning Plan. Great title. A little bit later.
Good one. Now, to a worrying substance that should have disappeared from our playgrounds decades ago.
Yeah, Lucy has been to find out more.
There's nothing kids love more than the thrill of throwing themselves round a playground. And you might think the biggest risk they face here is a grazed knee. But could there be a danger lurking in our playgrounds that we wouldn't want near our kids? I'm talking about lead paint. For more than 20 years now, UK laws have meant any paints used should be lead-free. Problem solved, you might think, but only if those laws are being followed. Dr. Andrew Turner of Plymouth University is an environmental scientist.
Surely we are not still using highly toxic material in parks?
That was our impression and our assumption. And yes, lead was banned in the 60s, 70s, and you'd expect it to be a historical problem.
But is it? To find out, Dr. Turner has invested in this snazzy-looking machine. And we've invited him and it to join us in Bristol to see just what the lead levels are like on the apparatus our children are playing on here.
Now, to help Dr. Turner, we've enlisted some willing and expert assistants who actually use swings and roundabouts. So let's meet Eliza, Isabella, Daniel, Anne-Michelle, Elizabeth and William, accompanied by the parents. Ready, guys? Let's go to work.
Left undisturbed and intact, paint's chemical components are safe. But if it deteriorates over time, it can crack. And if those cracked bits end up put in mouths and swallowed, well, it's less than ideal. Andrew's machine fires X-rays into the paint to analyse its chemical makeup. While he gets busy, our kids record his findings. With tests completed in our first playground, how many of the apparatus have lead in their paint?
OK, kids, after 3, 2, 1, Show your mums. No way.
Wow.
All of it.
Oh, that's shocking.
Every single piece?
Yeah.
You hear of it in lead paint in houses, and we've always been taught about making sure we upgrade our paint, but we've never ever heard about it on children's play equipment.
While Andrew's team moves on to test other playgrounds, I've come to the University of Bristol to ask Professor of Child Health Alan Emond about the danger lead poses.
Children are particularly vulnerable to the effects of lead for two reasons. Firstly, is they're more likely to ingest it through their behaviours. And secondly, when it gets into their system, it stays in their body for a long time. So even small exposures to lead in childhood are potentially damaging.
What are the effects on children who are exposed to lead?
Our own research showed effects on the educational attainment of children. There's evidence of effects on behaviour, particularly hyperactivity and antisocial behaviour. And then at the very high levels of lead in the blood, you can get actual damage to the internal organs, particularly the kidneys. The bottom line is there probably is no absolute safe level of lead in the body.
In total, we tested painted equipment in 6 council-run playgrounds in Bristol and found worryingly high lead levels in half of them. One also produced readings for the highly toxic metal mercury.
Who is to blame for this?
I have sympathy with the councils because they're probably importing things, having the assumption, quite rightly, that we've banned lead in paints. But if they're sourcing it from a cheap supplier and it's coming from maybe the Far East, then they're getting through the net somewhere. They're not being checked as they come into this country.
And do you think that this problem is being replicated across the country?
I would assume so, because we've measured throughout the southwest and in southern England, and the findings are broadly similar. We're finding leaded paint in 40 to 50% of the parks, and we're finding it in both old and new structures as well.
And what do you want to happen?
I would like to see a more coherent strategy of monitoring. Also, if there is a problem, I'd like to see some sort of guidance and advice as to how to remove the paint or remove the structure and reapply new paint. And parents should be vigilant, especially if your child has a tendency to nibble on things. If there is a part with flaking paint in particular, it's always good advice to wash your hands before eating.
There's still one question left unanswered, and it's this. If lead paint's been banned from our playgrounds for over 20 years, why are we still finding it in what should be the safest of spaces for our children?
Well, we have spoken to the local government association who represent all of the councils in England and Wales to make them aware of the situation, and they've told us that it's a local issue.
So if you're worried about flaking paint in the playgrounds that you use, we'd encourage you to contact your local council if you can, and to get your kids to wash their hands with water after playing.
Now, of course, we also spoke to Bristol Council, whose playgrounds we saw there in the film, and they told us that they will be checking the issue with their play equipment suppliers and reviewing the council's plans for older play areas. They also say that they buy their play equipment from well-known, experienced suppliers who are required to comply with health and safety standards.
Now, off fun topics and back on to you. Your book, your wonderful book, is dedicated to your parents.
It is, yeah. My mum and dad were an enormous influence on me. In the Second World War, my mum and dad really had a good time in the war. It feels sort of slightly awful to say that, doesn't it? But they were young, working-class people away from home.
Performers, right?
Yeah. Well, they hadn't been, but my dad learnt how to play boogie piano, and there were lots of Canadian forces up in Scotland where he was. So he was in the Canadian Forces dance band. So he defended our country from Hitler by playing Fats Waller tunes for 5 years. While my mum, she joined the WAF, and she was in Reading, and was really turned on by amateur dramatics and spent an enormous amount of time doing Terence Rattigan and that kind of thing. And then when the war was over, they were, as I say, they were working class, they were from Hackney, but they just bought a semi-detached house in South Woodford before the war. My dad could have gone to Canada to be a boogie pianist, but they came back and lived a respectable semi-detached life, and then found that they'd got this son who had some kind of facility for the thing that was their dream.
Yeah,
and
gosh, they must be so proud of you then, of what you achieved. They must have been.
They absolutely loved it. And they gave me a kind of confidence. I think, you know, being an actor is very much a confidence trick. I mean, like, you know, we're doing live telly now. A lot of people say, that is so scary, but you learn a sort of confidence about it, don't you? And it was my mum and dad who gave that to me, I think.
And of all the things you've done, I mean, obviously Blackadder is a big deal, but I couldn't believe it, reading in the book, that you weren't actually in the pilot. So how did you end up in the series?
No, it's fun, isn't it? Looking back, it looks like, oh, well, it must have happened. It must have been successful. But the first pilot was really not very good at all. So bad, in fact, that loads of people had turned down the part of Baldric. I was only offered the job 3 days before we were due to go into rehearsal. So they must have asked at least a dozen people before me.
But it feels like it was made for you.
I know. But we never did that pilot because there was an industrial dispute at the BBC on the very day we were supposed to do it. I then left, went to work at the National Theatre. They made the pilot with another guy who was very good, apparently, but they then decided, no, we'll get Tony to do it. So I was commissioned to do the whole show. First week of rehearsal, another industrial dispute. The first series didn't go on. Even when the first series finally went on, most people said it was rubbish. It wasn't until the repeats of the second series when suddenly, vroomp, it went off like crazy.
Wonderful. I mean, the book is littered with lots of anecdotes from that and from multiple other things. And we kind of thought that we might let you choose some of those.
What is this?
By using Baldric's favourite vegetable, which we believe is a turnip, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So we've got words on the back of these turnips. I'll turn them around so you can't see them. So you're picking them at random. So we'll just pick a turnip and see what's written on it, Tony, and then I'm sure it'll spur on a memory.
Very light.
This is the word we didn't quite know how to pronounce properly.
Voussoir.
Voussoir.
You all know what a voussoir is, don't you?
No, tell us, Tony.
OK, well, this is what we were talking about earlier. Live television, live time team. Very, very scary, because we were doing live, but not like here, in a little studio, over about 5 fields, stretching the technology. We don't have time to do a proper rehearsal. I haven't even seen the script for the last quarter of an hour. But that's all right. I've got my cue cards, like you've got.
Good to go.
I've got my autocue, like there is running there. I've got a little thing in my ear. So that's all right. I'm just going to have to busk it through to the end of the programme. We've all had to do that at some time. Then I put my cue cards down and lost them. And then the autocue packed up. And then we were so far away from the scanner that the thing in my ear packed up. I had absolutely no idea. Imagine if you hadn't rehearsed this and now you've just got to do...
You're flying blind.
Yeah, and you've got
like
no questions. I had nothing. I just turned to Professor McAston, who was next to me, and said, "So, Mick, the Normans... tell me more." and I blundered my way through it, being pushed from pillar to post. People came running out of the scanner. Hugh Whittingstall was on it at one point, dressed as a Saxon for a reason. I had no idea why he was there. He was yanking me up the hill, shoving me into these people, going like this. What am I supposed to talk to them about? And suddenly I realised that we were going to finish on this Norman window. And I had no idea what it was supposed to look like. I did remember what it was called. The voussoir.
There you go.
I was wondering when you were going to get to it.
I just went blundering round the hill looking for this flipping voussoir.
Yeah.
And then when I finally found it, it was just a moment made in heaven. But it only worked because of teamwork, because we'd been working for so long together. Everyone knew how to see me through it.
Listen, and if you want to find out about Liza, Who Dares Wins, or John Wayne... Yeah,
you want to hear about that.
Very quickly, Liza was when I tried to cop off with Liza Minnelli, and it was disaster. But
it's all in the book.
Read this.
Good stuff. Now, tell us about the Normans. No, actually, don't. Anyway, now back in May, we investigated why so many pubs are closing up and down the country, and we spoke to many of you who were trying to save them.
Now, Helen Fossborough has been to Manchester to meet a community who've gone out and who've gone one step further, even with the help of some friendly property developers, and built a brand new pub from scratch.
The good old British pub. Traditionally, it's usually at the centre of a community, but across the UK, they're sold to be demolished or turned into flats. This is happening more than 80 times a month in the UK. British boozers are under attack. The pub trade no longer seems like a good business prospect. However, I'm about to meet some people who are defying the trend. Despite all the problems in the pub trade, Ben and Joe have just opened a brand new pub in Manchester. But why have they taken the risk?
The people in this pub today are a really good example of what pubs can do. Pubs bring people from across generations together in a space at the same time, which you don't always see. We like to think of pubs as the original social network.
This is not just another pub. This is the pub that Ben, Joe and a small community have built from scratch. And when I say from scratch, I mean everything, right down to the pump handles.
I made beer pump handles and a beer tap, which is on there at the moment, and a couple of tiles too, I think.
I made one of the baskets, did a day of basket weaving.
It was the cask and keg pump handles. So the cask ones we did on a potter's wheel, but then we did wood turning on a lathe.
Ben, how do you build a pub?
We have no track record for building pubs. We're not architects, we're not master planners, but with the enthusiasm and help of the people of Manchester, it's become relatively easy.
How long did it take you and how many volunteers were involved?
We've been doing this for 12 months. It's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people have crossed our path and helped us get to where we are now.
Why did you fancy getting involved in building a pub?
It was just an opportunity to kind of meet new people and develop new skills, really.
I joined up because I'm interested in beer and interested in having a go at things.
Interested in beer, that's a new one. Annabelle was sitting on stools you made. How does that feel?
It's great, they feel very comfortable.
How important do you think a project like this is?
I think it's a great idea because it's really pulled us together. It's made me really aware of the pub and the site.
Yeah, it feels really nice to kind of know that we've had a hand in it, really. It's been a really nice kind of community project.
I think it's that connection with the people that have made it, that people have been involved in it since day one. So it's been a really creative design process. It's got a little bit of every person that's been involved in it in there.
Across Britain, pubs are closing every week and there are a lot of historic boarded up pubs. Why did you decide to do a new build and not renovate one of the old ones?
Well, we see a pub as the heart of the community, and there's no pub in this community, and we felt that we wanted to bring everybody together.
So if you want your own pub, it really does seem like you can build one yourself. Well, with a little help from your friends. Cheers!
Well, what an opening night there at the Pilcrow. I mean, what a buzz, what a sense of achievement, I guess, from the local community. But, I mean, do you see that as a realistic model to spread right through Britain?
I don't really see it as a realistic model. I mean, it is a fantastic pub. It's beautifully designed. The sense of community spirit there, I think it came across. I mean, everybody who came to the pub had made something from the bar stools to the pump handles. But what sets this apart is it's been built in a central business district of Manchester, where developers realised there was no hub. There was nowhere for the business people and for the residents to go. So they put money in and built it up from the ground, which is brilliant, but it's rare because usually money is at the heart of these stories and it's money that people haven't got. But yeah, fabulous atmosphere, great pub.
And back in May when we spoke to you, there were 27 pubs a week closing down. Is that still the case?
That is still, well, it isn't still the case. There is some good news on that front because developers, as we reported back in May, often see Britain's pubs, usually historic ones, as low-hanging fruits. They've realised that our planning laws in Britain are quite weak and they can exploit those. But since we reported on the story in May, that figure's gone down to 21 pubs closing every week. Often much loved, usually viable and often historic. So that is good news. It's still more than 80 pubs a month. But I think it's happening for a number of reasons. I think many communities are realising that the developers are targeting their locals and they've realised that they can fight back. They can apply to councils to apply for an asset of community value status, which gives them a layer of protection in planning. So they're fighting back. And on the flip side, some councils have also realised that our British planning laws are weak and that we're going to lose our cultural heritage if we don't tighten them up. So some councils are tightening them up of their own volition because these properties are worth far more to developers as mini supermarkets, bulldozed as supermarket car parks, office space or private homes.
So looking back at some of the pubs that we featured then, back in May, and you know the situation that they were in back then. What's the current situation? What's the update?
Well, I'll update you on two historic pubs in Kent that we featured. The 15th century Chequer Inn, which is the last proper community pub in the village. It's been boarded up and closed for the last 18 months.
Yeah.
The developer who's bought it wants to turn it into a private house. The community are very keen to keep it. So the latest on the Chequer is that Dover District Council have said that the community can try and raise the funds to buy the pub themselves. Now, it's doubled in price since the developer bought it, but they're trying. And a couple of weeks ago, they had a pop-up pub in the village hall, and they've raised more than £70,000 so far to the asking price of £340,000. Very determined. It's the last proper pub in the village, so they're not going to go down without a fight. And just a few miles up the road, we reported on the historic Red Lion. Now, that's been a pub for 750 years. It's mentioned in the Doomsday Book. It's Grade 2 star listed, which puts it in the top 5% of protected buildings across Britain. Again, a developer wants to turn that into 2 private homes. It's been boarded up for 18 months and closed. The latest from the council is the community were sent off to try and find a serious buyer. They found 3, including a household name. And when they went back to the council with those details of the 3 purchasers, the council have now recommended that the pub still be turned into 2 houses. So
You'd
this
think
has
with
gone
a
to the
Grade 2
planning.
star it would be well protected.
Well,
but
it's gone to the
obviously
planning
not the case.
inspectorate now, so the community are busy getting their appeal in.
Thank you, Helen. Now, in his 2 decades on Time team, Tony helped us visualise hundreds of ancient buildings, but it's a lot harder to know what the people who lived in them really looked like.
Yeah, well, one man works to bring these faces back to life, almost back from the grave, and evolutionary biologist Ben Garrett has been put to the test to see how good he is.
Facial reconstruction combines art and science to put a face on the past. In archaeology, it can resurrect famous faces, like the king in the car park, Richard III. In forensic science, it's used by police to solve the most serious crimes. But just how accurate are the techniques of facial reconstruction?
Well, the One Show is in a unique position to find out, because not only do we have a skull, but we know exactly who it belongs to.
In 2014, using MRI scanning and a 3D printer, I became one of the very few people in the world to own a plastic replica of my own skull. And a copy is now on its way to Richard Neve, one of the UK's leading experts in facial reconstruction. He's going to use my skull to rebuild a face that fits.
But what we haven't told Richard is that it's my face he's reconstructing.
One's first feeling is that it would probably be male. The face is quite big, nice and symmetrical.
Normally, Richard would work with DNA and dental experts to learn more about the age, sex and ethnicity. So we've given him a few clues.
Male, Caucasian, age 30 to 40. It'll be interesting to see how he turns out.
For more than 40 years, Richard has recreated faces from ancient history, and his work for police investigations has featured on Crime Watch and led to the identification of murder victims. For the next 2 weeks, Richard will spend more than 60 hours sculpting my face using his artistic talents and anatomical expertise. First up, he inserts pegs to indicate the depth of my flesh. Next to the eyeballs, including eyelids and surrounding ligaments. And then he starts to build the muscles of the face.
This is the temporalis, and it is one of the major muscles of mastication, of chewing. You can see it working on the side of people's faces as they chew.
Areas of soft tissue, like the lips, leave no hard evidence. To reconstruct them, Richard has to use other tricks of the trade.
The width of your lips should be approximately the same as the distance between your 2 pupils. So by measuring from here downwards, Richard should be able to work out the width of my lips.
The nose is also a tricky feature. Richard has to use the few clues that are available from my skull.
Sometimes you'll get a nasal bone that's sticking up, and sometimes you'll get one that's coming down in a big sort of hook. So that is relatively straight, and that is relatively straight, so there's no indication that it's a hooked nose.
The challenges of reconstructing soft tissue mean that facial reconstruction is never an exact science. Even so, After 2 weeks of careful sculpting, how will Richard react when he actually meets the owner of the face he's been reconstructing?
Hello, Richard, I'm
Hello.
Ben.
Good morning. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, you too.
Can I see you sideways?
Of course.
Wonderful. Yes, amazing. Do come in.
Thank you.
Sans hair, sans beard, sans moustache, but
It's quite surreal, isn't it? It's no, I can wholeheartedly see Garrod traits all the way through that. It's definitely me. Definitely got my nose and chin.
In profile, you've got a little bit more of a hump at that point.
Mm-hmm. Now, I've broken my nose 3 or 4 times and had it reset and surgically...
That's cheating.
I'm sorry, but it's great. It's great that you can see that.
To be honest, you are a slightly more healthy version than this. This is where you've been out in the jungle and you've lost a lot of weight here.
It's a very diplomatic way of putting that.
I'm always critical of my own stuff, but there's nothing there which is wildly out. It's all about right, yeah.
Richard has accurately reconstructed the key features which would be used in forensic science to help identify victims and solve crimes. And all he had to start with were the bare bones.
I thought that was really impressive, actually.
Favourite line ever. Can I see you sideways?
Yeah, absolutely. Right, now, Tony, as you are, of course, a history buff,
Yeah.
we thought that we would put your mind to the test with some reconstructions from the past. So these have been created in a very similar way to what we saw there. And here we go, then. So you've got to try and guess who these people are.
I don't...
Now,
We'll give you some clues,
Yeah, we'll give you some clues.
I don't even know what sex that person is.
Right,
I mean,
okay, interesting.
he
was
born around 1323 BC.
Oh, so he is Egyptian, he's Ramses.
He lived in a sandy place. Yeah, you got that. He died in his late teens.
Oh, it's Agarthan Tutankhamun.
That's
You're right.
Tutankhamun.
Yeah.
Well, this gentleman here was actually the first construction from a real human skull, right? Now, he liked music, this man, and he lived between 1685 and 1750
so he's a
in
sort
Germany.
Oh, so he's a sort of Beethoven-y...
He is a Beethoven-y type. This is the music.
He's sort of a J.S. Barkey.
He's Bark. Well done, there you go. Very good.
Okay.
Wonderful.
And finally, who is this dashing Viking based on?
I know. Yeah, go on.
Well, look, this is the one show, and I wouldn't have guessed it.
Go on.
Anyway.
Open your mouth, Matt.
It looks remarkably, hideously like the man right next to you, Matt.
It is
me. Now, the thing, I didn't make it into Madame Tussauds, but I did make it into the Jorvik Centre.
Oh, really?
Well, I mean, why is your
Are you going to be there all the time?
Why is my mouth gaping? Well, I'm supposed to be selling fish.
Right.
So what happened? So I had to go. It was an extraordinary experience. It was a bit like being buried alive, to be honest with you, because they take a full kind of cast of your head, put all this gelatine stuff, and it all goes hard, and then put plaster of Paris around. Made this model out of me, and then I've been in. I don't know how long ago that was. It was
16 years ago, but there's a bit of bad news. Yeah, they've decided the floods earlier this year. The Jorvik Centre are. You're gone.
Oh, really?
Yeah, you're gone from the exhibition.
That's
However, it's a bit of a silver lining, every cloud and all that. They're going to give you a place. I mean, they're going to help you out.
All right.
Yeah. So they gave you a little send-off, one last send-off before they ditch you, right? Here you are. Yeah, there you are. Parliament Square, Big Ben.
Oh, good. I've never been down there, actually.
Westminster Bridge for a few selfies. Got a bit lost, though. There you are, looking at a map.
There you go.
Where am I?
Fish.
Stop the police, ask them for some directions.
Never.
And finally, a little bit underdressed at Buckingham Palace.
I love it.
Yeah, and here you are tonight.
No. Hey! Reunited. There you go.
I
look
mean,
at that.
I can't even look at it. The Viking Centre have said that they would like to recast you as a, wait for it, an animatronic leather worker. I don't even know what that is. I don't even know what that is.
Oh,
that is it for today. Thank you so much, Tony.
I love it.
Autobiography, No Cunning Plan, is out now.
Very good. And thank you to you as well.
Which is the real Matt? I'm confused.
I don't know.
Alex is going to be back tomorrow with actors Noel Clarke and Lindsay Coulson. And also Ken Bruce will be talking all things Thanks to Terry Wogan. Hope you join us then. Bye-bye.
Thank you.